All right, our doors are opening and we'll let everybody just get a moment to get in here and then we will get started. Good morning. Good morning. I always look forward to this to see who's joining. Hi, Bob. Hi, John. This is always the fun part for me. I tell everybody that every week, but it's just like you hosted a party and you want to see who's going to show up. And this is a really important topic, I think, that we're covering on this series. And really looking forward to this conversation today. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds and we'll get started. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Candace Swick. If I haven't met you, I'm the marketing director here at Westminster Village. And this is Tuesday morning. It's Village Chat, 10 a.m. The sun is not shining today, but it's not cold. So I'm going to be happy with that. And we just planted new grass seed, and so we could use some rain. So it's okay. Well, I hope everybody's had a wonderful week. Thank you for coming back to us. We're having a really, I think, rather important conversation this series. We are talking to our expert residents about the financial side of living in a life plan community. I know a lot of folks plan to move to a life plan community, or maybe they would like to plan, but they might have questions. And while we are happy to answer those questions, who better to hear from than those who have already done it, those who are living it, our residents. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to just go around and introduce the three of you. We have right here, we have Mr. Terry Phillips, we have Mr. Stephen Belter, and we have Dr. Martin Jischke. Thank you, gentlemen. And you are all members of the financial discussion group here on campus, which I got to sit in briefly before I had to go. I'm ready to retire so I can participate in some of these things. I think that would be good. Although I know that everybody who lives here is not actually retired. So there's not everybody who lives here is retired, which is an interesting fact. So I think assumptions we need to make. So before we get started, I just want to recap that Westminster Village is a life plan community, and just briefly share with everybody what that means. So a life plan community, unlike a rental community, it is where you are purchasing the right to live here for the remainder of your life in the housing unit home that you choose here on campus. You're paying a fee. It's called a life occupancy fee, and that guarantees your placement in the village through the continuum of care, should you need it or when you need it, through the remainder of your life. A couple of things about that: it is similar in cost to buying real estate. The difference being, I mean, it's actually priced per square footage of the home that you are buying that fee for, or paying the fee rather. The difference would be is that depending on the contract type you choose, most common would be the 80% refundable. Your estate, or you, should you leave the village at any time, will receive 80% of that fee you paid back. The village is actually only keeping 20%. One of the things that makes Westminster Village different from other life plan communities, which I know there's a few others in the country that operate this way, but it's not as common, is the village guarantees that even if you were to outlive your funds for paying your monthly fees, because you pay that buy-in fee, that life occupancy fee, but then you're going to pay a monthly fee for all of your utilities in your home and the amenities. Even if you outlive that, the village will continue to pay your monthly service fees. You will never have to leave and go to find another place to live. That is a huge difference here at the village. To break that down really quickly on how it works, they actually spend down that 80% that was held in trust. That's kind of like your backup funds. And then the foundation, which was started by the original board, the original residents, if you will, back in 1976, I believe it was, started the foundation, that kicks in. And to this day, that is operated and managed by the residents. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Did I miss anything?
You hit the highlights.
I hit the highlights, yes.
I think it's a major factor in the decision of people to come to Westminster Village. It's a kind of insurance policy if for reasons that no one hopes for or anticipates.
Right.
You're never going to be left stranded. And I think as we get older, that's a major concern for a lot of people. Don't want to be a burden on their children, their families. This is a very, very important program.
I would agree. It's actually one of the reasons that drew me to Westminster Village when I received a call asking if I would interview for the job. And the more I researched and learned, not only were the employees happy and a lot of longevity with employees, but when I learned about how it operates, I was so in awe. Because after working in our field a long time.
I've had a number of experiences of friends, acquaintances, business friends, talking about coming to Westminster. And when you describe the life occupancy fee and its implications, you can almost see the relief come across their face.
Yes.
As this potential disaster is all of a sudden dealt with.
I often refer to it as a kind of a sort of insurance policy.
That's right.
That you're purchasing late in life. So I think it's a wonderful, wonderful program. So folks have sent in questions, but before we go to those questions, can we just briefly go around and just state, introduce yourselves again? I know I already introduced you, but how long you've lived at the village and how long you've been involved with the financial discussion group?
I'm Martin Jischke, more than 50 years in higher education, originally as a professor, researcher, and then for the last half of that, almost 25 years, I was the president of university, ending with 7 years as president of Purdue. And I've been with my wife, Patty. We have been residents over 5 years now at Westminster.
Wonderful. How about you, Steve?
Came to West Lafayette in 1969 as a freshman in electrical engineering and never left town. For a while, I was part owner of WinTech Corporation. We did a number of things, but most recently we were internet service providers. We purchased our apartment here a little over 2 years ago, and moved in February, a year ago, February.
Very good. And Terry, let's remind everybody how long you've been here.
Well, I came to Purdue in 1959 to go to school and I never left town. So I had a career at Purdue and retired from Purdue, and I've been practicing this retirement program for 22 years. And I've been here at Westminster for 5, same as Martin, and enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, thank you for being willing to share, I think, some important information with people. Can I ask, when you decided to move to Westminster Village, what did you consider from a financial perspective? I mean, what was the things that you had to take into stock from the financial aspects when you were thinking about making this move?
Two really big ideas that I would share. First, I had been planning, we, Patty and I had been planning our future for many years. And that's a piece of advice I would give to people. Don't start estimating your cost of living and your assets the year before you're going to move or not move to Westminster or some other retirement community. I had been doing it for years and years, and I still do it. At the end of every year, I go back through the checkbook and try to figure out, where did we spend our money? How did our investments do? And so I had a history, a track record of what our assets were. And within the last 3 or 4 or 5 years before we made a decision to move to Westminster, began to ask, well, how much would it cost to live there? And so when it came time to make a decision, all the data was in and I had a history of the data. And that was very reassuring. And the life occupancy fee and the pledge to provide financing if for some reason ran out of money, that was very important. And the second big idea I would share with people is how do you deal with the uncertainty of the future? And I think of three things. One, inflation. Right now, we're in a high inflation time.
Yes,
And some of my initial estimates are not accurate as a result.
right.
A second one is the uncertainty of how the markets will behave. Many of us have saved money. We put it into investments as part of our effort to keep up with the cost of living. And we're in a period right now where the markets are kind of soft. We had a wonderful decade before that, but that's a second kind of uncertainty. And then the third uncertainty as you get older is medical costs. It's almost inevitable that all of us will have increasing medical costs as we age.
Right.
And some of those costs can be very expensive. I was just reading about a pill you can take to lose weight. If you're carrying too much weight, take this pill. It turns out it's between $1,000 and $2,000 a month for this pill. So you know, it could be $20,000-$25,000 a year for a single pill. And I raise these three: inflation, investment returns, and medical costs, to ask how do you deal with the uncertainty in the estimates you made, both of your income and of your expenses. And my answer is I tried to do the nominal case of how much money are we going to have, how much do we need, and then I put in a fudge factor, or if you will, an uncertainty factor, so that under the normal circumstances, we'll end up with more in our estate than maybe is wise, and the kids, my children and grandchildren, will benefit from that. But I'm covered against these risks that are inherent. And finally, the structure of the life occupancy fee is another kind of insurance to deal with this uncertainty. But for me, the uncertainty of the future is far and away the most interesting and the most difficult question.
I would agree. And Steve, what would you say? Were there certain things that that you took into consideration, or things you had to put in place?
Well, I'm comfortable with using a spreadsheet. And unfortunately, that allows you to spin your numbers out for a while, but my concern in retirement was making sure I didn't outlive my retirement. For some of my friends, their primary concern is to make sure they get more back from Social Security than they paid in. And that's important to them, that's fine, but that's not what I was worried about, going to Martin's uncertainty question. So I took the projections from Social Security, I took the projections from Deb's retirement from Purdue and my retirement from Wintech, looked at our investments, and was able to convince myself that while I don't think I'll make it to 100, the money would make it to 100.
That's important.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
important. How
And
did
then
you go ahead?
to deal with Martin's medical expenses, and you are exactly right when you see those numbers come in from the hospital. We both did the Purdue retirees insurance, and that is a fantastic arrangement, and that solves that concern for us. And tried to be conservative about how much we would withdraw from our retirement. And then looked at the costs of Westminster, and that was comfortably within our budget.
Yes,
One more thing, I agree with both of you 100%, and planning has a lot to do with being ready for retirement. But I recognize that Westminster Village also plans,
mhm,
and that had a lot to do with my making a decision, especially what I call Jessica's plan. One of the accountants around here, Jessica, is the one that did my plan.
and she's now our accounting director.
And I
Yes.
know she is.
Yeah.
But that plan made a difference too, to me.
Mhm.
I was in planning before I came, but
And maybe we should share with folks what you're talking about is when you apply, there's a financial application to move to Westminster Village. Just because they want to make reasonably sure that you could feasibly afford to pay the monthly service fees for the remainder of your life. And it takes into consideration if you were to need the averages of amounts of healthcare based on your age and when you move in. We actually it's a pro forma, if you will. It projects your income, your assets, and it gives a spreadsheet that shows, okay, you can afford this home, this type amount of, can you afford this size apartment or this size apartment or this cottage or that cottage or so forth. And I would agree. I think that brings a lot of assurance. And that's something we can do for anyone who wants to come in and fill out a financial application, and we can take that information and turn it into that so that you can see, if I move in at this date, at this time, this is where I'll be. I think that is key. I would agree.
If I could add a comment, after we moved in, one of the residents that lived in the area that we live in, High Bridge, and I had a discussion, and he was a former banker.
Mhm.
And he actually had looked at Westminster's financial structure and how much risk there was in Westminster failing.
Mhm.
And the answer was Westminster was in better shape than most of the retirement communities around here. So that's another uncertainty in all of this.
True.
And not all of us are equipped to take a look at the audited statement or the financials and decipher how strong is the organization you're pitching your retirement to. That's another one of those uncertainties that you want to try to think about. How well organized and financially sound is this as a business, as an ongoing operation?
And we should add, whenever anyone comes in to apply for that financial residency, they are given a disclosure, the annual disclosures, and they can see our financials there because we are a nonprofit 501. I was going to say that wrong.
501c3.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we have to disclose that.
Yeah.
And so we give that to, and some people read it all the way through, and some people take it home, and it's a book that stays there because it's actually pretty thick. There's a lot in there. But I have heard that from numerous people that are good at like deciphering those things, that they're surprised and pleased to
That's
see the strength of how our finances are, which is important if you're essentially investing money, into
Right.
Westminster Village. Is there anything that you think you would do differently in planning or preparing anything? You mentioned inflation has hit this year. So, we know that every year, our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30.
Yeah.
And every year there is a increase in the monthly service fees based on cost of living increase, honestly, just like anywhere in town. I have not seen an organization yet that in a retirement situation or rental anywhere that doesn't do a yearly cost increase. We know that this year the board had to make some difficult decisions to do a higher than normal increase based on the inflation and the things that we've had to cover at the village. And I think what we should mention here is that it's the board really thoughtfully coming together on that And that board is made up of residents and it's made up of volunteer businessmen in and around the community. I really appreciate that. It's not just some corporate heads. And like I experienced in my old company saying, oh, we need to make, more profit. No, this is to ensure we are sustainable, as you said, that you're investing in a good investment here at Westminster Village. How did you prepare? Like, how did you think about those things? Was that something you were concerned about, that yearly increase, and knowing that, because it's on average, it's about 3%.
Well, when I put together our family financial performance, if you will, I put an inflation factor in. It turns out that I did both 3% and 5%. 5 is a little high, the average, but these spikes like we're in right now can
Kind of average that out. So you did
well,
5.
it takes a long time to catch up to an 8% year of inflation.
Yeah.
So I'm back at this notion of doing the nominal case thoughtfully, conservatively, I think would be wise. But then I think you've got, in this, my experience, and I've asked people about this, is it's a judgment. There's no obvious formula, but you've got to add a safety factor in, a fudge factor, if you will. And after it's all done, can you stand a decade of high inflation? If you actually run the numbers out, it turns out it can be very expensive. But you've got to do that with the understanding that if you don't have enough money to keep up with the standard of living you want, you may have to decrease your standard of living. I mean, you've got to be prepared to make those kinds of decisions.
I think that's something to bring up. At the village, we have a range. We can accommodate someone moving into a 1-bedroom apartment to enjoy the lifestyle here. But that initial cost to move in this year anyway, it starts at $69,000. And then, but we go all the way up. We have, over 2,000 square foot residences and homes. And those are obviously a much higher starting point. I mean, I want to say, I think the highest right now is 400, 405, something like that.
4,000.
400,000. Yes.
Oh, farm.
Yeah.
Talking about the life occupancy fee.
Yeah.
And the monthly service fees range as well. I mean, the cottages and the hybrid residents pay a little less than the apartment residents, but they don't have as many services. So it's just a little different. The apartments, it's all inclusive, very similar to a cruise ship. If you've ever gone cruising, which I'm kind of addicted to, it's my thing. So it's all inclusive. Whereas in the hybrids and the cottages, you pay a lower monthly service fee, but you're not receiving as many amenities. And certainly you can add them on, certainly.
That's right.
So I think that range can help accommodate different budgets, which is nice to know.
Another point to this, it follows on to what you just said. It's one thing to do this sort of financial planning before you come here. To get a sense of whether you can afford it and what the implications are. You should continue to update that every year. And if it turns out that your predictions were appropriately conservative, you're in good shape, you can continue to the lifestyle that you're used to. But you should be prepared for the possibility that your assumptions in the plan didn't come to fruition. And you're going to have to adjust your lifestyle. I just think that's part of wise management of your resources and keeping a certain level of control, if you will, on your finances. So Patty will tell you at the end of the year, I drag out all the records and I actually develop an annual balance sheet, cash flow statement and asset measurement. And I keep track of this over time. I got 20 years of these things. And it allows me to, if in fact my estimates initially were not accurate, to start to adjust. Can adjust to how many vacation trips we take and how often we go out to restaurant for a big dinner. I mean, there are things you can do.
There's
to
things
manage.
that you can, yes.
But the important point is the planning is an ongoing activity, I believe, for people who are wise about their finances.
I would agree, and I hadn't really thought about that. I'm like in the point of getting to the retirement phase. And so we're still earning,
Oh, that's
and we're
right.
still planning and doing that way. And I hadn't really thought that this will be this practice that I do. I'm on a monthly basis, and then probably about 2 times a year, I sit down and I'm the planner in our family. I'm not the implementer. That's my husband.
That's right.
But I am the planner. So it's interesting. We each have our roles. And that's how often I do it. I never thought about that, Martin. Thank you. That's not something I'll stop doing.
I'd like to add to something Martin mentioned in evaluating where you're going to invest. Westminster has fantastic staff, has fantastic neighbors. I have fantastic neighbors here. The facilities are first rate. The Live Well Center, the fitness center, just absolutely fantastic. The range of support as your life moves from independent living to needing assisted living, maybe memory care or health care is fantastic. But something that I think sets Westminster apart, that's unusual, is we are a locally owned nonprofit. And the people who set this up in the beginning, who still guide the month by month, year by year operation, are first rate. The money that Westminster earns goes back into Westminster. Whereas some of the other nonprofits or the for-profits, the money that's earned here locally may very well be going into a facility that's not doing as well, or maybe paying off other investors. And there have been several things that have directly impacted me here positively because it's locally owned and the decisions are made locally. Another good reason, I believe, to choose Westminster.
From my perspective, not only as residents, but that was a huge factor in choosing to come work here and represent Westminster. Because having spent time in our industry, I found myself with, I hate to use as strong as word as disgust, but I would say there was days I felt disgust at our industry in general, but it's an important industry. What we do is important. So I kept thinking there just must be a better way. And then Westminster called me.
If I could add a comment about this, I've thought now after having been here 5 years, what is it about the culture of Westminster Village? And I think its independence is a piece of this. But I think its roots in the Presbyterian Church, a kind of spiritual orientation, makes the culture of Westminster an inherently generous culture and a sharing culture, a sense of community that grows out of that puts the well-being of the residents as the highest priority, as opposed to a return on investment for investors,
Right.
or as a profit center to be used to sustain other activities. And I think that culture that's been created here now over decades,
46 years.
yeah,
this summer.
is a piece of the Westminster experience that I certainly didn't know before I moved here. I knew some of the people who lived here and had some sense of the place, but I've come to have a deeper appreciation for the values that are part of Westminster, and that sense of caring that starts with the board of directors. It includes the structure of governance. It includes this commitment to finance people who have trouble with their finances. I mean, all of that is part of a culture that's quite remarkable.
I would agree. Thank you. I'm realizing that we have had such an interesting conversation that we've hit 10:30. So this has been, it's just really good for me, I think, to hear these things from you gentlemen, because it is our job here in our office to really help guide people with their decisions moving to Westminster Village or elsewhere. It's just our job to help guide them. And so this is extremely beneficial. Thank you so much. If you have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat box, or you can email them to me. I'll send out the recording of this and you can do that. But before we let you go, let's just pop over to Stephanie and get some updates from her, and we will get wrapped up here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This week, we are having our fundraiser for Honor Flight on this Thursday from 5 to 7. It is not too late to sign up. We've had a huge response. We're so grateful to be able to host this time. You can eat here, picnic style, or take it with you to serve your family. But please join us for honoring our veterans this Thursday, 5 to 7. That's all I have.
Thank you, Stephanie. If you'd like to get an order in for that or learn more about it, you can go to our Facebook page, go to our events page, or you can go onto our website. I would say Facebook might be the easiest, and by all means, call us if you have any questions. We're really excited about that. Last night, after WLFI aired their segment promoting and talking about this fundraiser for Honor Flights on Thursday, we had an additional 100 orders when we came in this morning. So I emailed the reporter, the Samantha Thiesk, who reported that story. And I said, oh my goodness, we had a really lofty goal of what we could raise for them. Because, the Honor Flights is solely on donations. You can't buy your ticket. It only can come from donations. So I said, I think we might reach that big goal. And I think we better plan to smoke some more meat than what we had set aside. So we're really looking forward to that. Like I said, go to our Facebook page or give us a call and you can place your order there or learn more about the event. Next week, we will be having Jane Smith, who is a resident and board member, and she serves on the financial committee. She is going to wrap this up with us. I'm really excited to hear from her. I think that'll be interesting to hear from a board member who is also a resident who serves on the financial committee, to hear her feedback on moving to Westminster and the financial planning side of it. And please send us your questions. If you have specific questions you'd like to ask her, please email them to me. And I'll put that list together. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Any parting words before we go? I think we've covered everything.
One piece of advice we received multiple times when we described to people what our plans were, they said, don't wait too long to move.
I would agree.
I would second that. There's an interesting phenomenon. If you wait too long and come here, too old, you don't have the energy, maybe the wit to form relationships and friendships and participate in activities like the fitness center and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And in a retirement community, it can all of a sudden become very isolating. So we got the same advice from friends. Don't wait too long. Go when you're still have your wits about you and you're physically able and you can begin to become part of the community, as opposed to being so far along in the aging process that you're physically and mentally unable to participate in the community.
That is very good advice. Thank you. I mean, I've heard that so many times. I share that with people. I hadn't really thought about just not being able to participate mentally or physically. I had just thought about more the healthcare side, that it could be too late for you to enjoy these things, but that's a really powerful way to state that. Thank you.
That's another one of the dimensions of wellness.
It is.
that's important.
It is.
Exactly,
I agree.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time so much. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.